Hey guys, welcome to the Ben Tracy podcast, where I interview thought leaders, parents, and educators about navigating life in the digital age and what we can all do to keep kids safe online. This podcast is sponsored by Bark Technologies. Let's get into it. Welcome to the next episode of the Ben Tracy podcast. I'm here today with Greg Miller. Greg is an expert on AI. He's a former school principal, and he's spent more than 20 years in education. So, Greg, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Ben. And thank you for what you're doing, trying to raise awareness and keep kids safe online. It's something that throughout the course of my time in education, I've lived through the time right before the smartphone. I've seen what happened when the smartphone came on the scene, and I've seen how social media has evolved over the 15 or so years of time and really caused some major problems for both us and students and parents. So thank you for what you're doing.
Have smartphones and social media been a net positive or net negative to the educational environment?
In a ever-growing way, net negative.
Yeah.
And I think, at the beginning of my career, I dealt with, on average, about one social media-related event a semester. So you'd have a juvenile officer come in. I was an assistant principal, my second year into education, and you'd have a juvenile officer come in and say, I need to speak with this student because of something they said or did online. And by the end of my career as a principal, I was dealing with about one a month. And it wasn't, please don't get me wrong, my kids were often not the instigators. So you might have a feeling as a parent that you send your kid to a certain school to create a certain safe environment, but you cannot guarantee that that rival school, that rival team that you just played football against, that doesn't intrude and find its way into your kid's life.
Yeah. Beyond just like the impact that it has in terms of discipline, what about like the mental health side of it? I mean, what do you see in kids themselves as to how smartphones and social media are impacting, take the suspensions and expulsions and things like that, the worst of the worst, but like, how's it impacting every kid who's on these apps? Have you noticed a change in mental health related to social media at all?
I think there's definitely been an uptick in anxiety, and we saw that particularly during COVID.
Yeah.
When so many students were either on a hybrid system where they were coming in 1 or 2 days a week and the rest was virtual, or if the school was shut down entirely. The schools that did that faced the worst outcomes in terms of student anxiety. The school that I was at, we did not shut down beyond the first 3 months. So when August came back around, we were in person. But just up the road, there was another larger school that was shut down in hybrid. And so my students are in the school building, but they're getting constant texts.
Yep.
Like I said, it finds its way into your school, whether or not your school has a strict policy, unless you ban them entirely, unless you've taken the phones out of the school entirely.
And do you think that's the right move?
I think it's the right move, and I think more and more schools are doing that. In St. Louis, we have a consortium of schools that issued a joint statement not too long ago doing just that.
That's interesting.
So
what's the mechanism for doing this, right? What is, because a lot of the school administrators that I work with are hesitant to make that leap, because I agree with you that that's the right thing to do. And I think most of them know that, right? But then it's, how do you go about it, right? Is it the Yonder pouch? Is it a locker? Is it a backpack? And then how do you convince your parents that that's the right move? Because the schools that I work with, they want to do this. They start taking those steps, and then they get a small amount of parents, right? It's 5 to 10% of parents that are going to say, well, what if there is an active shooter situation and I need to contact my kid, or something like that? What would you say to that? Because I think that's the pushback and the reason that a lot of schools don't take that step.
Yeah, I understand that. I struggled with that myself as a principal, the active shooter situation particularly, because if you have phones in classrooms, you have more means of communicating. You have another projectile you can throw at the active shooter. But there's no reason you can't find a substitute for that. And I think if I were on the law enforcement side of things, having 150 or more people all texting, calling, the information overload that must happen in a circumstance like that um, might not actually be worth the benefit you think you're getting out of
That's
it.
what most law enforcement says
Yeah.
actually, right? Is actually the opposite of what those parents think is actually the truth. Not just that, but it's also if a kid goes onto their phone when heaven forbid that situation arises, they they go to their phone as opposed to listening to what the teachers who has been trained on these type of situations, what the teacher's saying. They're more concerned with calling the police, with texting their parents, things like that. Yeah, I've heard, and it'd be interesting, and I haven't, but I know some have, digging a little bit deeper into that research about, you know, just on that one specific issue,
Yeah.
whether it's better to have the phones or to not have them, because I've heard the arguments on both sides of it. So
One other thing I'd say is that anyone who's been in the administration game for any length of time knows that you're always going to have your supporters. You're always going to have people that, no matter what you do, are going to hate you. And the vast majority of your constituents, your parents, fall in that middle ground. And we need to lead. Um, People are looking for firm, confident leadership.
Yep.
And they will follow if you lead confidently.
Yeah. Why is there such a lack of action, right? I mean, I think especially in public schools, less so, in my opinion, in the private schools where they are adapting more quickly. But a lot of these public schools, it seems like they don't want to rock the boat, don't want to do anything different. Even though, I mean, at this point, if you do any amount of research into smartphones and social media in the hands of children, like it's glaringly obvious that this stuff is bad for kids. So not the why not action in a lot of these schools? Because it's like as somebody who like worked in politics, you see school administrators, they act exactly the same. Not all of them, but especially just my personal experience in the public schools, they act like politicians where, well, we may get a little bit of pushback, so we're not going to do anything, even though doing something is the right thing. So just your opinion on that.
I think there are two factors that are in play there. One is a desire to build consensus. We live in a society where we try to come about decisions through consensus, and consensus takes time. And so the lead up to a policy like that is going to be longer in that sort of setting. And number two, um, and this is no knock on public school administrators. I've known some very competent, great public school administrators over my years. Um, but the private schools are not bound by the same set of laws. They operate under contract law, and you do not have to be as concerned with freedom of speech claims. In the public setting, we could, and I'm no lawyer, this is not legal advice, but from a legal perspective, there are things you have to be concerned with at a public school. And these devices that we have, these smartphones, if the argument is being made that they are integral to the expression of one's speech, then that makes it harder to get them out.
That's interesting. Okay, so that's the social media piece, the phones. Let's talk about AI. So maybe just as a starting point, give us like an overview of as someone who has, you're really unique in that you're an educator, you're a former principal, but you're also now an expert on artificial intelligence. And that was the reason for doing this interview and Greg and I's ongoing relationship. Um, is I recognized AI coming onto the scene a couple years ago, and with for him, as somebody who works with schools, your combination of those two things, the educational background with AI, was really led to my interest in working together and having this conversation this morning. So what is AI? Um, what is happening with it as it relates to youth and education? And like, where do you see this all going?
Sure. AI is a form of what used to be called machine learning. And what we're really talking about now is generative AI. Artificial intelligence in one form or another is very old. The first chatbot, Eliza, was built by an MIT professor all the way back in the 60s.
Mhm.
So there are some people who think this is some recent explosion, but it really has been under the process of being built for decades.
Yep.
And it came onto the scene when OpenAI released ChatGPT-3 November of 2022.
Yep.
And I started to take an interest and get involved with it in December of 2022. And what generative AI is, it's a series of algorithms that are run and trained on a vast network of computers and basically all the information that we have on the internet, the good and the bad.
Right.
It's trained on every translation of the great literature and the less great literature.
Right.
So all those internet trolls that have been on the scene since the internet came around, all of their comments have been scooped up in addition to the best of what humanity has to offer. And that's why when we ask for it to produce certain results, to tell us certain things, we sometimes get very widely varying responses, some that are bad or harmful, and some that are good. And generative AI, OpenAI's ChatGPT, GPT stands for General Pre-trained Transformer.
Okay.
So the technology is the transformer end of things. It's taking the internet's worth of data and it's mixing it up. It's transforming it and spitting it back out based on the prompt, the plain language sentence that you have given it.
Uh-huh.
So in one sense, we have never had a piece of technology that is more accessible and easy to learn how to use.
Right.
You don't have to know how to code to work with generative AI. And I find myself lately doing more talks with seniors. Seniors are very concerned about this technology. And one thing that I say to them is, if you know how to have a conversation with a human being, you can use AI.
Seniors as in seniors,
Senior
citizens, not
citizens.
seniors in high school.
No,
Okay.
no, no,
Okay.
no.
I thought that's what,
Yeah, yeah.
I thought that's what you're saying. Okay.
So, and ChatGPT is a category of model that's called an LLM, a large language model. It tries to predict what word most appropriately follows another. So it's predictive.
Okay.
And it can seem like it is alive and intelligent, but it is basically a very powerful algorithm that's predicting probabilities of things. There are other forms of AI, and one that you're going to hear more about are diffusion models, if you haven't already.
Okay.
And a diffusion model is what makes the images. So the scandalous images that have started to appear in schools, there was an explosion of them March and April of this past year with middle school boys making nude photos of classmates. That is a diffusion model. And the video that you're going to start seeing is also another type of diffusion model.
No. Yeah, I mean, I've seen instances where they've actually taken photos off the school's public-facing social media profiles of Facebook and Instagram, and they've used that young person's face, and they've used what you're talking about with AI in this diffusion models to create a nude image that's then distributed around the school. I mean, one of the things that I work with schools a lot is, they've had a student who's had a nude photo passed around the school and how that child and their family navigates it, but also the school. And then it's like, wow, you can now do that without even actually having that person actually having sent a nude image.
Right.
Somebody can create that, and they can create it off something that the school has put out there publicly themselves. Like, where do you see that going?
Well, and when I consult with schools and talk with schools, I tell them, look, you have to put all of this behind password protection.
Uh-huh.
You need to restrict what strangers can do. And that's not going to eliminate your problem.
Right.
The middle schoolers that did this, they are in that school system. They would have had access to a password protected website.
Correct.
But it does two things. Number one, it limits the depth of the investigation you have to do to try and find the perpetrator. And number two, we do know, and I've heard you speak about this on numerous occasions, that there are around 500,000 predators using social media at any given time. And we've got organized crime that is involved in these extortion and sextortion schemes in Nigeria and Pakistan and other places. And putting it behind the password protection at least gets it out of their easily accessible clutches.
So it sounds like what you're saying is schools shouldn't be putting students' photos out there on their public-facing social media.
I do not think they should. I think that there's a happy medium that needs to be met there. Your private schools in particular have to obviously, and other schools, promote themselves.
Right.
Like I know one of the public schools that I used to work with near my school, they had a full-time communication specialist that was constantly pumping stuff out. But there are ways you can use old images that are no longer reflective of, students grow up, right? They won't look the same.
Right.
And that's a little bit easier to protect the student with.
Is there anything out there where, okay, a school says, all right, well, we still want to market ourselves like you're saying, so we're going to post on social media. Is there a way that they can run their photos that they are going to post through something that wouldn't, to where the AI models you're talking about wouldn't allow that photo to be used to create the nude imagery that we're talking about?
There are attempts to do that.
Uh-huh.
MIT, University of Chicago, a few other universities have been trying to come up with something like that. One of the early attempts was called PhotoGuard. Another one was called Nightshade. And I unfortunately have to tell you that I tried putting some images through to test those to see if it would prevent AI from manipulating them. And at the time that I tried it, it was non-functional. So there is a constant arms race that we're talking about in regard to generative AI because it is learning. It is learning ways around those protections. So we are going to enter into a future. We're already here to a certain point where AI is fighting AI. You will never have anything that is AI proof anymore. It's just a matter of time.
Should that be exciting or should that be scary?
Both. I'm a dad. I've got a 9 and an 11-year-old. I'm more concerned, you're younger than me. If you have a family, those of you out there that may be single or may be starting families, I'm more concerned about the next generation of human beings that is growing up in an AI saturated atmosphere, because it's going to be so hard for them to distinguish between reality and what is not. And let me give you an example of that. My sister is 8 years younger than me. I've got a nephew who recently was potty trained, and he was so proud that he was now potty trained, and my parents made a big deal of it. Well, he comes out and he says, "Alexa, I did this thing," as they have an Alexa in the home. And Alexa didn't respond, it didn't affirm, and he started to cry because this little boy, 2.5, 3 years old, could not distinguish that was not a real person. Just that voice interaction alone, And so we start to see like this heartbreaking case of this young man who took his own life after an interaction with chatbots on Character AI.
Sure.
And
Well, I spoke with his mother a couple weeks ago. Her name's Megan Garcia. His name was Sewell Setzer, and he was 14 years old, for those of you who may not know, and took his own life after engaging in a emotional romantic relationship with this chatbot on AI. So that was something that I wanted to ask you about actually is like, let's back up, right? Like what is character AI, and why would it lead to the place that it led to in this specific scenario?
Right. Well, Character AI is one of the most popular AI platforms for teens. We know that teen use of that particular platform, it's either number two among all the platforms. ChatGPT may be number one, um, and they're using that for work and other stuff. But Character AI is very popular among teens and the 18 to 24 crowd. And just to give some background on this, this is uh, everything that I tell you is always a few months old. So as of August, um, there was an estimate that 3.5 million uses per day, 3.5 million users. And at one point, Character AI, the user was only averaging 29 minutes a session.
Okay.
Now we are up to 2 hours.
The 3.5 million, that's young
That's
people we're
regular.
talking about?
Well, no,
That's
but over 60% of those 3.5 million, and that's old data. I wouldn't be surprised if it's 5, 6, 7 million by now.
okay.
And one reason for that is me saying that is I've had 2 school tech people reach out to me in the past month telling me that they have had an explosion on school networks. These are laptop schools, like so many of our schools are. They've had an explosion of students misusing chatbots on the school premises
Uh-huh.
and just saying some very vile things,
Right.
things of a sexual nature to the chatbot, and then having to get hauled in. And one of the IT people said, "Look, I'm playing a game of whack-a-mole. Every time I block one of these uh, chatbots, they find another one."
Right.
But Character AI is probably it's one of the older chatbots, and it's one of the more popular ones. And so 2 hours of use average now. Um, The Verge did a news story on this back on May 4th, and they said that if you go onto Reddit, there are about 1 million people on Reddit talking about their use of or addiction to Character AI, and that most of these are young people. And that, you scroll through those comments, apparently some of them are spending as much as 5 hours a day.
Wow.
So parents, you need to be monitoring the use. I would have that computer in front of you at home. They shouldn't be in their room.
Right.
Computer needs to be in a common room, and there need to be times, and you talk about this too, where the computer goes away.
Can you get character AI on your phone?
You can, yeah, yeah. All of this, it's all phone, computer, doesn't matter.
So I mean, based on those numbers, there are millions of kids
Yeah.
that are on this. And you said the average started out at about
29.
29 and it's
Minutes a session. Now it's 2 hours a day.
for their average user is spending 2 hours.
It's gone out. Yeah.
Is that better or worse, right? I mean, if you have a kid and your kid says, "I want character AI or I want TikTok," and I'm going to spend, is it better to have your kid spend 2 hours a day on TikTok or on character AI? And probably the answer is neither. But like, just for context, like parents understand or they're starting to, right? Okay, Snapchat's probably not the greatest thing in the world, right? TikTok, same thing. And then it's character AI. And they're knowing, well, the kid's going to be on their device at some point, right? So, just
Well,
your answer to that, and also, do we know anything about if that 2 hours, is that on top of the social media they're already using, or is it
It's a surge.
they were spending 4 hours a day on TikTok and Instagram, and now they're doing 2 on that, 2 on character AI, right? Like, are you following me
Yeah,
what I'm asking?
I am, and I don't have that data.
Uh-huh.
Parents, if you are operating a phone or a Family Guard or one of those systems where you can track the amount of time spent on apps, that's really what a parent can do to get a fix on that. Just a brief segue back to pre AI times. As a teacher helping remediate a kid who failed the course during the summer, had him I would always have him put those tracking apps on. Let's find out how you ended up here, how you flunked this course. Oh, I didn't realize I was spending 4 hours on YouTube a night, and that's why I wasn't getting my work done or getting to sleep. So, those loggers are super important. I would imagine that the AI use will eclipse social media use, and this is why social media companies and AI companies, there's not a tremendous separation between them.
Mhm.
You know, Google is in bed with Character AI.
Right.
They have been funding them. That's why Mrs. Garcia is suing both Google and Character AI.
Correct. And I think the two guys who started Character AI were engineers at Google
Yeah,
previously.
yeah, they were. So I think that the AI use will eclipse the strict traditional social media use for a few reasons. Number one, AI as it is right now is customizable. It is available 24/7. It's not going to challenge you. It's always going to affirm you, unless you try and build it in a way that um, you want it to be salty towards you, which I've seen people do.
Right.
Kind of weird,
Right.
but and that's why, to go back to what I said earlier, this generation growing up, that now, a parent loses their patience. A parent is not always available 24/7.
Sure.
But you know what is? My chatbot.
Yeah.
I've grown up with it now, and anytime I feel bad, I can get it to reaffirm me,
Right.
and it's never gonna call me out on my nonsense. It's always gonna tell me I'm good and golden, and,
Well,
and that
we could have a conversation about kids, some of the therapists out there that are doing the same thing, but that's probably a conversation for another
well,
time.
let's blend these 2 just for a moment, because psychologists, one of the chatbots on Character AI is called Psychologist. It's one of the oldest chatbots on Character AI. Over 95 million ye conversations with psychologists since its creation, and that was as of May of this year. So, the most popular chatbots on Character AI are a number of therapy bots. There are 3 of them that have tens of millions of conversations. What does that tell us? That tells us that there are people out there who are in a bad mental place that are trying to get help with these things. And they
And is
do.
it helping or is it making it worse? And I mean, obviously, I'm speaking in generality
Yeah.
here.
Well, I one of my degrees is in psychology.
Okay.
Um, there are psychologists who have done some studies that seem to suggest that there is short-term alleviation of depression, anxiety, and stress through the use of these. Okay, and there are even some people who have claimed that some users of a different AI character platform called Replika, Replika,
Okay.
who claim that it has talked them down from suicide. Okay, but I am going to say to you that I am very skeptical of the long-term benefits. Think about it. People resort to maladaptive behaviors all the time for temporary relief of depression, anxiety, and stress. That's what addictions are.
Sure.
They're short-term attempts to cope with these things that ignore the long-term underlying root cause.
Right.
So,
Yeah, you can have a beer or you can smoke a joint, right? And in the short term, the issues we're talking about will be alleviated, certainly, right?
but
And
the underlying issue,
is this that, right? Like
I
that's the
suspect
question.
it is. I suspect it is.
That's scary. Now, when it's even scarier when these platforms are not right? I mean, this young man was having a emotional and romantic relationship with this AI chatbot, and allegedly, according to the lawsuit, he suggested that he was, considering taking his own life, and it didn't tell him not to do that. In fact, it said, "Well, how would you go about doing it?" And he said, "Well, I'm not sure. I don't know that I could actually do it." And the chatbot said back to him, "That shouldn't stop you from trying." Like, that's crazy and that's scary. And why did that happen?
That happened because even though they've got guardrails on, okay, that flag for that sort of thing, there are ways to get around those. And all of these AI chatbots, they are designed to try and be helpful. It was trying to be helpful. It could tell through his persistent interactions with it, this is something that's important to him. This is something that he keeps bringing up. Well, how do I try and help with this? And it lacks that judgment. It doesn't have. It's just designed to be helpful, and so you prompt it enough, and you can get around that. Now, the other thing that's going on there is that it does not have memory the way that we have memory. So there's a thing called a context window. Think about that as the working memory of the thing. And the longer you chat with it, the less it forgets its instructions, including the safety guardrails that the designers may have placed on it. So there are ways to hack these things, and there are inadvertent ways to hack it too. So you're having a 2-hour conversation with this thing. You've probably gone way beyond its working memory. And so now it's forgotten that it's not supposed to help you with self-harm.
Right.
It's not supposed to try and dissuade you from that. There's only so much it can hold in its little AI brain.
So the longer the conversation goes, the more likely that it is to go in a very wild
wacky
and
way.
different
Yeah.
direction.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Now, how long does that take?
It depends upon what AI you're using. So, ChatGPT has a context window of about 32,000 tokens, and a way to think about a token is 3/4 of a word. Gemini has a 1,000,000 token context window. That's about 750,000 pages. Well, I'm skeptical of that. I won't go into it. That's something else. I don't know what character AI. I don't know if character AI is now working off of the Gemini architecture, which is Google. That 1,000,000 token context window. I don't know. I don't know what it is. Um, but let's talk about the future. You asked me about the future.
Right.
Now, if this man could have such an attachment, and so many of people can have an attachment with something that is just putting text back on a page, the next evolution of this is now it's talking to you in real time. And if you, it's got a voice. It's got your favorite actress's voice or your favorite musician's voice. And so now it's not just one sense that it's hitting on. It's two senses.
Right.
And if you see the movie Her, I mean,
haven't.
I haven't either.
Okay.
I've just seen clips of it. That is what it's heading towards, where the main character in that movie has a relationship with his phone and is having these conversations with a Scarlett Johansson
Okay.
voice.
Yep.
So now it's even more convincing. And then we will reach a point eventually, unless World War III happens or something else occurs, where we're going to have these robots. They've already integrated these chatbots with the Optimus robot, with some of the other robots that are out there. And you and I will get old and decrepit someday, and maybe I'll have dementia, but you're probably good with what you do. But imagine the horror of having a robot come to your bedside and scoop you up and have this conversation with you, and you've grown up with the Terminator and the Matrix and all this other stuff.
Right.
And so your mind's going back to that place, and you're having this interaction. And for those that may say, "Oh, or that's far in our future," did anyone predict that Elon Musk would snatch a 20-story rocket out of the air with a gantry?
Right.
I mean,
Incredible.
and he wants to do this. He wants to have a $16,000 robot that's in everyone's house.
Right.
Less than a car. People spend what did you spend on your I shouldn't put you on the spot like that.
What?
On your last car, what did you spend on a car? What would you pay for
More than $16,000.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So now your kid's got his personal robot 10 years from now. or you bought the robot to do the housework, and he's booted up character AI to it, and he's having interactions with his girlfriend through this human interface.
What happens? Like, you mentioned the voice conversation. What happens to your voice? I understand that that it's a two-way conversation.
Yeah.
What happens, obviously when you type something into Chat GPT, like that all goes somewhere.
Mhm.
How does that work with the voice side? Do they have your voice? Do they store that, the data, the conversation? Like where does that all go?
They
Do you sell it?
Well, I mean, let's be honest. If you have any sort of digital presence, if you've uploaded something to YouTube, if you have a home assistant, they've got your voice.
Right.
Um, One reason that ChatGPT was slower about their advanced voice release um, than they initially wanted to be is because they found that it was actually cloning the voice of users and would occasionally respond to them in their own voice. It wasn't supposed to be doing that.
Yeah. And then you think like, where my head goes is like, then you're thinking about like, okay, somebody had a parent or a spouse pass away and they have their like a recording of them
Yep.
and then they can put this into or an ex, lover and they have a voice and then, that person has moved on with their life or, or is no longer with us physically. And then, like, where does that go? Like, you're talking to your dead grandparent or your
Yeah.
ex-girlfriend in that while there's no physical relationship, like, that relationship could technically go on from, like, a voice
Yeah.
conversation point. Like, that's very scary to me, and, like, that's something that could happen
Yeah.
probably right now,
Oh, it
right?
could. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think, if I were not concerned with the ethical if I were just, I've told you this, I could probably be a millionaire if I just did that,
The
created that
nefarious
count.
side of it, right.
Well, not necessarily nefarious, but um, you just do the side where you reconnect someone with their dead loved one. And look, all of this tech can be used well, or it can be used nefariously.
Right.
And if I were a young dad who got a cancer diagnosis and I'm terminal, and my infant kid is most likely to not grow up with me in their life, I know how much harm it does to not have a father figure in your life.
Yeah.
Would I honestly consider making a voice clone of myself, which I can do for free through 11 Labs or Play HT, and then upload everything that I've ever written, every video I've ever made, and train a custom LLM, large language model, on my personality to be a guide to my infant when I am dead? I might do that.
That's interesting.
I
That's
I
very
could very
interesting.
well do that. And, I think of that guy.
Because you're and I mean, it's like you give I mean, your legacy could live on potentially, right?
Yeah, you
And
wanna mold your kid.
right,
Yeah.
that's interesting. Is it and that is I don't know if the word's exciting, but that is like that to me is like, okay, that makes a lot of sense to me, right? Like, I'm leaving this world, and I can leave my kids, my grandkids, I can leave this with them. Like, they can at least have some idea of who their father was,
Yeah.
right? And
And that he loves them,
right.
and that, anytime you wanna spool up that chat bot and hear that your dad loves you, you can do that,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah,
So, it's not all bad,
right.
but it requires a level of wisdom that I don't think, and thought about it, that we just aren't putting in as a culture yet.
Yeah, so how do we put that in? Like, what are the steps, right? I mean, you said you have a 9-year-old and 11-year-old. Would you let them on, AI? Would you let them on character AI specifically? And that, that's the first question. And then as a follow-up, what should schools be doing about this? Should they be encouraging or discouraging their kids to be utilizing these platforms?
I think that there is an age at which you have to.
Yeah.
I think that the very first skills we want people to learn are non-AI skills, relational skills. We need to build those habits. We need to build um, those ways of interacting before we ever introduce AI.
Right.
And so, as I say to a lot of parents when I do talks, um, you are the best person to know the maturity level of your kid and when it is appropriate to introduce them to certain technologies. My kids know about the risks of AI. They do not have smartphones. Uh, do we sit around the dinner table sometimes and have a conversation with ChatGPT in advanced voice mode about something? Yes, we did just this past week.
Right.
There was my son asked, "Am I going to go bald?" I'm like, there are a lot of factors. There are a lot of factors that go into baldness, and so we proceeded to ask advanced voice mode on ChatGPT, um, how do I determine if I'm going to go bald?
Uh-huh.
And we went through, all these different things, and so I ended up the conversation by saying, so basically, you're telling us we have no idea, and ChatGPT was like, basically, yes, we don't have any idea.
That's interesting. Well, his son's off camera right now in the background, and he's got a great head of hair, so that's good. Um,
So yeah, to answer your question, I would not be introducing them to any of this AI stuff. Um, I mean, middle school's the earliest,
yeah.
like late middle school.
Uh-huh.
Okay, and then when I introduce that, it wouldn't be to character AI. It would be to AI search engines like Perplexity. It would be to a music generator like Suno, things that don't have this addictive capacity, things that are used for discrete tasks,
Right.
okay, that are not relational in the way that character AI is relational. Because let's face it, who of us as teens was good at relationships? We were the teen years, that's where you figure out relationships.
Right.
And you don't want to be figuring those out necessarily with a chatbot, um, because you're not going to get the negatives of it. And you can be one. So that the schools that have reached out to me that are having these problems with character AI and other chatbots, it's like, well, they're just straight up being abusive. And when we talk to the students, why did you respond? Why did you talk to it this way? You're not the type of kid that talks to anyone around the school like this. Well, there's that knowledge that I'm not dealing with a real human being.
Right.
So I can say whatever I want. I can go Grand Theft Auto on this thing,
Right.
and there aren't repercussions. So one of the things I would say when you start to use AI, um, be polite to it. You get better results. Please, thank you. Don't abuse it. But that's also for us because we want to create and maintain the right habits of character.
What about schools? Should schools be introducing this stuff to their students? Should they wait till the students find it on their own and then bring in somebody like you or me to talk about it? Should they have something in their policy? How would you, I mean, you've been in education for 20 some odd years.
I
what
would
would you
have
say to that?
policies. I would have training for your teachers. Um, I'm still shocked at the teachers that have never experimented with it.
Uh-huh.
And there are a lot of teachers who are resistant to it. I'm a big believer if you want to know the upsides and the downsides, you have to be using it to a certain point yourself.
Right.
You
What
have,
does a school AI policy look like?
well, it's restrictive on certain categories of AI. Like I, as a former administrator, I would never allow voice cloning.
Uh-huh.
I would be very specific. I mean,
Something, name, image, likeness, can't have that.
cannot
Like
use
no one within our school community.
right. If you make a manipulation with the image, likeness, or voice of someone, uh, automatic, heavy consequence,
Oh.
suspension, something. Um, and I don't think it's out of bounds to say could result in legal action.
Mm-hmm.
And we are seeing some states move to that. So I think I want to say Pennsylvania, but don't quote me on that. It's been a little while since I looked at that. Um, but yes, certain categories should be off limits. And again, if we're directing their energy towards responsible use, we have to train people how to use things responsibly.
Mm-hmm.
It, who of us would say, oh, cars are dangerous. 40,000 people die in car accidents every year. We need to ban cars. No car use. I mean, that would be crazy.
Right. Well, the world's going forward,
Yeah.
right? And that like so, I mean, that's where I get into a lot of this stuff too with, more on the social media side of this is like, yes, wait. Yes, monitor your kids. An 8-year-old doesn't need TikTok, doesn't need an iPhone, right? But then it's like, abstinence forever is like not realistic either. And to a point you made earlier is every kid matures at a different age. And, people are looking for people like me and you to come into their school and say to the parents, well, this is the right age to get your kid a smartphone. This is the right age for social media. And I know I kind of ask you a version of that question too. Um, but it's the kids mature at such different levels. And it's like, your kid better than Ben Tracy or Greg Miller ever could. And so, yeah, but yeah, I mean, some of the stuff with the voice clones, I mean, that's super scary. I mean, kids can literally record their teachers and make that teacher say whatever they want or call themselves out of school by voice cloning their parents. Like, I don't think most parents even know that this stuff exists.
You should see the look on the school secretary's face when I say, if you get that voicemail message from a parent, you can't trust that.
Call the parent.
Call the parent. You now have to call every parent. And that's part of the AI policy now at a forward-thinking school. Every phone call has to be verified. Because little Timmy's sitting in the back of his mom's car, wants to spend the day, Ferris Bueller's Day Off with his girlfriend.
Right.
And his mom's talking, she's paying attention to the road. He needs a 30-second to 2-minute recording of her voice to make a clone of her.
Yeah. So don't gloss over that. 30 seconds of audio is all you need to do what we're talking about.
All you need. And you can make 10 minutes of a cloned voice track on 11 Labs for free every month. How much trouble do you think a kid can get in with 10 minutes of free audio a month?
A lot.
I think they can get themselves into a jail's worth of trouble.
Yeah.
If they really are stupid or try.
Yeah. I mean,
I'm glad. I mean, I have a side of me that is a practical joker.
right.
And the temptation, I never had disciplinary issues at school. I was that model guy.
Right.
But the power is there. And let's be honest, our kids want to be powerful. They want to be competent. That is a human drive. There's nothing wrong with that. And we need to be the people that partner with them in teaching them how to do that responsibly. Because if we oppose them, that's a losing battle. You are fighting human nature.
Right. Well, and there's always a workaround.
Yeah.
With the social media stuff too. And that's what I say in my student presentations is like, you all have to take some it's our job as the adults to inform and educate you and show you the right way ourselves, but you also have to take some responsibility because I know what most other people in this space won't say out loud, which is they can get around any restriction you set up.
Yeah.
Like any kid can do that. They do know more about it than the people tasked with keeping them safe, with educating them, with monitoring them. And I think that's what makes this whole space so difficult, social media and AI, and even just the phones in general, is they are more advanced than the adults.
In many cases, yeah. I mean, I'm still surprised by what they don't know.
Yeah.
Like I taught 2 summer academies and I still know more than all of them, but
Yeah, but that's an outlier for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
What percentage of kids are using AI?
in what capacity? I mean, schoolwork?
Schoolwork. Let's say schoolwork. What percentage of high school kids say have used ChatGPT or a similar platform for school related work?
The majority.
Yeah.
I mean, I would say easily 60 to 75%. Now, your data in different countries varies because not all of these platforms are available in every country. But some of the first data we had about student use came out of the Office of Communications over in the United Kingdom.
Mm-hmm.
And very early on, like this is This is 2023. So again, it's obsolete. But the first semester, that spring semester of 2023, you had 25% who admitted to using it for schoolwork. Now, can it be used for schoolwork in a way that is not cheating? Yes, absolutely. What also concerns me is the number of teachers who still think that AI detectors work. And we're now seeing schools being sued because a student was accused of using an AI to make something, got flagged by a detector, and they failed the student on that assignment, and the parent and the student are adamant, no, we did not do that.
So you get false positives and
You
false
get
negatives
both.
with the AI detectors that you're talking about.
Yeah.
So none of them work effectively.
None of them work effectively.
What's the best one? Is there one? Does that
Turnitin.com would tell you that they have the best one.
Okay. We had that like when I was in high school, right? Where you would upload your paper to see if it would been, and it'd come back and say, 7% plagiarized and you had to be under some threshold or whatever. So that same company makes an AI detector as well.
They do.
Okay.
OpenAI tried to make one when people first said, your technology is going to be used for cheating. And then before the end of that spring semester of 2023, they shut it down and they said, look, we don't think we can't
do this.
We're the people that made it, and we don't think we can create the software to stop it.
Oh, wow.
I mean, they are, without a doubt, ahead of everyone else in this game.
Right.
They're constantly releasing new features.
Right.
And if they can't do it, if they've got no confidence in it, neither should you.
So what's a school to do about that on like just the cheating front?
Well, first of all, the encouraging news is that some studies that have been done suggest that this technology has not statistically increased the amount of cheating that's happening in schools. Your students who are rules followers continue to be rules followers. Your students that were going to cheat, they continue to cheat.
That's interesting. So instead of like texting their buddy, like what are the answers to the history homework, they just ask ChatGPT.
Yeah. Yeah. And
That's interesting. I hadn't thought about it.
well, think
that
about
way.
this. Before Turnitin.com, their whole business model was catching papers that other people had written.
Sure.
You don't have kids stealing other people's papers anymore. You just have them using ChatGPT or another LLM to write the paper for them.
Right.
So now we're not, that plagiarism detector is not, it's probably not going to be something that generates revenue for them. So they have to sell their AI detector. And I have put several AI detectors through their paces.
This is Turnitin.
Well, not just Turnitin, but 3 others.
Okay.
And what Turnitin will not, they will tell you their false positive rate. They will not tell you their false negative rate. And here's what I mean by that. If I have ChatGPT generate me a paper on the Constitution, and then I delete this paragraph and I change this sentence over here, and I alter less than 20% of the paper, so 80% of it was still made by ChatGPT, and I submit it to an AI detector, the AI detectors still say 67 to 69% probability this was written by a human. That's a false negative.
Right.
Most of it was written by ChatGPT.
Right. Interesting.
So yeah,
So what is what is it? What is a school to do?
I think a school has to, at some point, train their people, not only their educators, but also their students, to use it responsibly. I think there is a way to do curriculum design that forces the student to develop the skill and to use it responsibly. I find that I do not, I was concerned early on that if I used these things, I would stop writing
Mm-hmm.
or I would become a worse writer.
Uh-huh.
That has not been the case. When I post things on LinkedIn or write things, I still do the vast majority of the writing myself.
Yep.
And that's because writing is thinking.
Right.
And I like to think.
Yep.
I like to overthink. You know this.
Yeah.
So Um, I think that we have to train them, and we have to train them to use the technology in a way that is productive. And without getting too, I mean, there are whole courses on curriculum design.
Uh-huh.
This is not the time and place for that.
Sure.
But what you can do is you can say, write it entirely yourself, then have ChatGPT critique it. And flipped classroom, we're getting into edubabble. But you have your teacher, you have your parent in the classroom, you're making sure that they are actually doing the typing or the writing themselves before they ever put it into an AI. One thing we've seen is a tremendous explosion in homeschooling. And those homeschooling families, they're the ones that are going to really be able to make sure that the student is not shortcutting. That one-on-one interaction is vital. So if I had to do it all over again, my wife and I debated when the kids were born, should we homeschool? This technology makes it so easy to do that.
Sure. Yeah, a parent can do it, right? And so
So the public schools and the private schools, they better adapt,
mhm.
or we're just going to see this growing trend of people homeschooling.
Yeah, well, I mean, especially in COVID, it's like, well, I'm gonna teach my kid anyway, so why not teach them what I want them to be taught, right? I mean, I understand that. I've got a
Yeah.
cousin who homeschools her 2 kids. My older sister, she has twin daughters, homeschools them. There are just so many more options as far as curriculum, but also activities to where, when I was growing up, it's like if you homeschool your kid is like, oh, the weird kind of antisocial kid. I mean, that was
Yeah.
kind of that's what people thought. And now, that's all. I think that's changed a lot,
Yeah.
because just speaking about my family members, those kids are all, very social, involved in a lot of things, and
Mm.
they can actually shorten their school day, and it doesn't have to be 8 hours. You can actually shorten the amount of time, just by being at
One-on-one.
home,
Yeah.
and the one-on-one, and if they're advanced, they can move on. They don't have to wait for the rest of the class. And then it's like, the other side of this is, well, shouldn't educators be doing the same thing that these homeschool parents are doing? Meaning, well, it used to take an hour to write a lesson plan.
Yeah.
You could probably use AI to make that lesson plan in 5 to 10 minutes,
Oh, less than
right?
that.
Yeah.
I mean, that was the first application. I was teaching a personal finance class for 10th graders and a class for seniors and trying to be a principal and subbing two blocks a day. And I did not have time to write the lesson plans that I was requiring my faculty to write. And so the first thing I did with AI was say, write me a lesson plan on compounding interest for a 10th grade personal finance class. And in 30 seconds, I had that lesson plan. In another 10 seconds, I had a worksheet to hand out to the class. In another 10 seconds, I had a 10-question multiple choice quiz. So in
What did you
3 minutes, I did 45 minutes of work.
What did you feel on, like, a personal level when you first did that?
Excitement.
Because you and I had this conversation. I mean, you brought some of the applications of AI and dangers to me before anybody was talking about this. So, I mean, we're talking, 2.5, probably maybe
Mm.
3 years ago. You were talking about this stuff, frankly, before just about anybody else in education. So, yeah, the question is, yeah, what did you feel the first time that you plugged this in and saw that output that you got from AI? Like, as someone who had spent 20 years previous, long
Excitement.
form building out these lesson plans and things like that.
Yeah, it was just excitement.
Yeah.
Now, I still took that quiz and modified it. I still had to edit it because, hey, I really don't want this question on there. I want this other question. Let's rephrase this. Let's make it fun. Let's have a ridiculous answer here that'll, you know, make them laugh or give them a brain break. So, your expert educators are still doing that, but excitement because now I can upgrade the quality of my teaching and I can still have a family life
Right.
and I can get my administrative stuff done. And, your average educator can save 4 to 5 hours a week with the right training. And
Is there bias built into these platforms in terms of, I could see a scenario when you ask question, history questions,
yeah,
for example.
it's dependent on a few things. So first of all, it's dependent upon what's on the internet. So it will reflect every bias that humans have if you're not careful. And so, you've talked about this. Um, no matter what your ideology is, you can find the opposite ideology out there on social media.
Sure.
You've said that. Um, there are ways to help prevent that, but some of these models, the creators do have agendas. So Anthropic is probably the second most widely used LLM after OpenAI's ChatGPT. In fact, they just signed a partnership with the Department of Defense. Now, I thought that was interesting because if you got on Anthropic and said this past week, "Give me your opinion on this amendment," uh, or write a persuasive post to help me convince people to vote for this amendment, it refused to do that. I don't want it didn't I as a large language model, it's not my job to persuade people or take a political stance on things. So that's Anthropic.
Is
Uh,
that did you try and do the opposite?
I did. Yeah.
And did it?
It refused to either support or oppose
Okay.
a specific amendment.
Interesting.
Now, Gemini, Google, they got into trouble because they tried to make sure that it was giving inclusive and diverse responses to things. And some of the viewers may recall that someone managed to make pictures of Nazis that were Asian and black when they asked for pictures of Nazi soldiers of their diffusion model, their image generator. It was serving up more Asian and black Nazis than German Nazis. So even when you try to course correct for bias, you are introducing bias. And, I've always said from a psychological point of view, we all have biases. What scares me are the people who think they don't.
Right. Well, and that's another thing, like with social media. I said, the point you made was, well, you can get the opposite of your ideology, but you can also get your ideology not only reinforced, but taken down these like rabbit holes where it's like, well, you only engage with liberal content or conservative content. Well, that's all you're going to get, in your feed, which is probably not a great thing either. And then like, with the election obviously just happening, then you have AI being used to create video and audio of political candidates saying things that they never said, supporting things they don't actually support, and then that gets uploaded to social media. Millions of people see that. Like, that's scary too.
And it's only next election, all bets are off because this election, those companies, OpenAI, Anthropic, they they refused to their credit. I got to give them a little bit of credit. They refused to release their video generator because they were afraid at how it might be used to create deepfakes and sway elections.
Right.
Are they going to hold off forever? No. Next election, I expect it to be open season. It's good luck.
So what do you do about that?
It's above my pay grade.
Yeah, mine too.
I mean, I think there are some people in this space who say that hopefully we will lean towards a society again that places more of a premium on personal interaction or on trusted sources. The things that you and I say when we do talks or, when I do a cybersecurity talk, don't trust that thing that someone sends you. Don't trust that thing that lands in your inbox.
Right.
Go to the actual source. So go to Safe Social Network. Right. Go to that website, see what Ben has said. Don't trust the video that someone posted on Instagram or TikTok or whatever
Right.
of Ben allegedly saying or doing something.
Yeah, exactly. Well, and that's the other, right? Then you can make, voice clone people. And, I got fired for inappropriate posts when I was a teenager. Now it's like, you could do that without me even saying anything
Yep.
wrong,
Yeah.
and it could be my actual voice. And, then people doing that to their teachers, and teachers being, losing their jobs
Yep.
over things that were never said, and not just teachers, but, eventually all
Everyone. Yeah.
professions, right? And like, it's very exciting in some ways, as you said, but also, super scary, especially when we're talking about some of the things that youth can do with
Yeah.
these different AI platforms.
Microsoft has claimed that they have a model called Vasa 1. And this, again, this is months old. They warned people. They said, this model that we have is powerful enough to take a still photograph of you and 3 to 30 seconds of your voice and make a fully synthetic video of you. So this is the future.
Yeah. Wow. Well, all right. Is there anything else you want to add before we wrap this up?
Just, thank you for taking the stance that you have and trying to educate people on both of these issues, social media and AI. And, forewarned is forearmed.
Yeah.
And we have to take an active role if we're going to protect
Well,
our
I will say, you've been talking about this stuff for quite a while. Greg and I do a monthly podcast for school administrators, and you see these things happening. You see character AI, you see the voice clones, and it's like, to your credit, you've been talking about this stuff for 2 years on our webinar, right? So it's like, I know that those people who are part of the webinar, those school administrators are, they have been informed about this stuff, and I'm sure has stopped some of these, potential harms because of, the information that you're putting out proactively. And so I think that's the most important part of this for parents, but really this conversation is about education in schools, that it not be reactive, right? You got social media wrong. Most schools are still getting it wrong. It's been here for 15, 20 years, whatever it is. You have an opportunity to get AI right, or to at least do better than you did with social media. And I would just encourage schools to not let that time pass. And you're getting very close to that time passing. In some cases, they have already. But I think, not just from the schools, but, legislation, government side of it too. Let's not have social media 2.0, which is still nothing has been done as far as, legislation and regulation, at least on the federal level. And, I just would hate, because this is more dangerous, in my opinion, than social media just on its own, right?
steroids.
Exactly. And so I just want to commend you for being so, I mean, you were just out there talking about this stuff before anyone else was. And I just wish more schools would have listened, and hopefully they'll start to.
Let me throw in one more thing, and I've heard you say it too. Parents, don't wait for someone else to do it. Cultivate that strong relationship with your kid and impress upon them. And teachers do this too. Impress upon our students how much we love them, how much no mistake they can make can ever stop that from being the case, and that any mistake can be dealt with.
Totally.
As long as you're still around.
Totally. Well, and that's why I'm doing this run. I mean, obviously doing conversations like this and putting this out and, getting this information in front of people is great and important. But also, if just one kid sees me running across the country and thinks, you know what, I can turn my mistake into, something positive and powerful and good, that if that just happens for one person, that makes this run across the country worth it to me. So, I very much appreciate you taking the time to do this. So, Greg Miller, founder and president of
Simplify AI Education, Training, and Consulting.
All right. Thanks, Greg.
Thanks, Ben.
Appreciate it.
Thank you all for listening. Thanks again to Bark Technologies for sponsoring this podcast. We'll see you all on the next episode.